Okay, welcome to the Saskatchewan Podcast Network podcast meetup. This is the second one that we've done. The first one was about podcasting through the pandemic, and we did that at the start of March, and it was excellent. People really enjoyed it. So we're now doing another one. My name is Dale Richardson. I'm the founder of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. And I also host a couple other podcasts separate from outside the network. I host the Talking 306 podcast and Persist, which is a new podcast about mental health in politics. And I do a bunch of other podcasting things too. So the Saskatchewan Podcast Network, for anybody that's tuning in that isn't aware, it's the central home for Saskatchewan podcasts. Right now we have about 30 members as part of the network. And really the goal of the network is for people to have a central place to go and listen to local Saskatchewan podcasts. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's local Saskatchewan content. The types of podcasts that we have really vary from, obviously like the Rough Riders, but we have tech podcasts and interview and residential school survivor story podcasts. There's a podcast about parenting. So yeah, we have a range of podcasts. So if anybody would like to check out the Saskatchewan Podcast Network, you can go to saskpodcastnetwork.com. The link will be up on the screen once I bring Jayme into the stream here in a second. Or please follow the Saskatchewan Podcast Network on social media. So we're really active on Facebook and Instagram. We do a little bit of Twitter and also LinkedIn. So yeah, please check out the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. So I'm really excited to do this podcast with Jayme Poisson, who is the host of CBC's Front Burner podcast. CBC Front Burner, and I'm excited to talk with Jayme about this. Front Burner it's technically the number 2 news podcast on the Apple podcast charts, but for Canadian produced content, it is number 1. It's behind the Daily a little bit. So just a little bit about Jayme. Jayme Poisson is an award-winning journalist and of course now a podcast host. She was a reporter at the Toronto Star for almost 10 years. And in that time, she won multiple journalism awards, including awards for her work reporting on former Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, sexual assaults on university campuses, and mercury poisoning in the Grassy Narrows First Nations. And of course, as I just said, since since October of 2018, Jayme has been the host of Front Burner, CBC's daily news podcast. And of course, it is one of the most listened to podcasts in Canada and is a fantastic daily news podcast. So here to join me for a conversation about her journalism career. And I have a ton of questions for her about podcasting and about Front Burner. Here's Jayme Poisson.
Hey, Dale. Hi.
Hey, Jayme.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for doing this. I know you probably got tired of me bothering you to do this, so I'm glad that we lined this up. Yeah, thanks very much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Really, I'm been so looking forward to this.
Yeah. So you're in terms of Front Burner. You're kind of at the end of your week, right? You go now into the weekend. So I have questions for you about, as I said, tons of questions about Front Burner. But why don't we just set the stage a little bit about you for anybody that doesn't know, just beyond that really short bio that I gave. Where's home for you?
Oh, right. You were saying end of week. I was thinking about bringing a glass of wine.
You can do that. I have some water, so yeah.
No, but this is just kombucha, but I should have. Where's home for me? Toronto is home for me. I grew up in Toronto. Yeah. I went to school at McGill and Carleton for journalism, and then I eventually moved back to Toronto. So I live in the city's west end near High Park for people who are familiar with the city.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So yeah, so mostly Ontario. Haven't did you yeah, so I want to talk to you about your time at the Star. Why did you get into journalism? What was the path there? And I guess because you went to Carleton, so obviously, what did you take at McGill first of all?
Yeah, I took political science at McGill, and I was always interested in journalism. Actually, I grew up in my house. The Star was like a very important sort of institution in my household. Right. So it was kind of cool that I ended up there. My dad read it like religiously, and then I did write a little bit for the McGill Daily when I was at McGill, and I liked it a lot. And then I thought about politics or policy work. I am sort of like a policy nerd. I don't know if you can tell sometimes on Front Burner, like today, our episode on sick leave, like I really like talking about that stuff. I also thought about maybe law, but I really loved journalism. So anyways, I ended up going to Carleton, and I did half of a master's in journalism. And then I did a summer internship at the Star, and they offered me the 1 year internship, and I actually just decided to take it. I thought maybe I would go back and finish my master's, and I haven't done that yet, but at some point I think I'd like to. Yeah.
Do you think you would have got that same job, or I guess a different job, if you hadn't if you'd continue on with the second half of the program, or like do you think you would have maybe landed up in ultimately the same place essentially with that first job?
Yeah, in retrospect, I think maybe yes, because I probably could have said to them, look, I'd love to finish my master's. Could I come back? And the internship at that point was there every year. But when you're young, I think that sometimes you feel like these opportunities aren't going to come back. So right. I think I just felt like, oh, I should take this. Like I should do this. And also it was kind of a wild summer. It was like the G20 protests in Toronto. I don't know if people remember those. And there were like all of those black clad protesters who were kind of, I don't know, well, they like set the city police cars on fire and broke a bunch of windows. And I was kind of in the mix there. And so I had a pretty good summer reporting wise, and I really just wanted to like keep going. I guess like one of the things that I really don't regret is that year I got to go to Egypt to cover the Arab Spring, and so obviously I would not have been able to do that had I gone back to school, and that will sort of remain one of the coolest things I've ever done. So
yeah, I saw that on your bio or somewhere in news clippings about you. So were you right on the ground during the Arab Spring? Wow.
Yeah, like right into the square. Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember. I mean, the vision that I have from that is the guys on horses riding through the square and whipping people. Just absolutely. Wild.
Yeah, wild. And the camels that yeah. And camels, I remember there were so many people, young people, our age, younger, would have been our age, when we were like 10 years ago, right? 18, 19, or like mid 20s. And the kind of hope and passion was really inspiring. I mean, it hasn't turned out that way, which is really sad. But I really have so much respect for all of those people that like essentially put their lives and their bodies on the line to stand up for what they believed in. Yeah, it was a pretty incredible thing to watch.
Right. So then when did you start the reporting on Rob Ford? Like 2012-ish? Like that's kind of when 2013 was when really things really started to hit the fan with him, but
sort of I jumped on board because I was on the Star's investigative team, and then I jumped on board sort of post news of crack video. My colleagues, Robin Doolittle and Kevin Donovan, had seen the video in like the backseat of a car, and then I came on board. I was doing a bunch of reporting on the gang, the so-called gang angle. Mm-hmm. So, the group of young people in the city sort of northwest corner that the mayor was smoking crack with, and who, were being accused of selling him the drugs. Some of them were sort of allegedly part of this, what the police called a gang that was, or some other members were smuggling guns into the country from the U.S. And also the gang had been linked to a couple of other pretty high-profile shootings in the city. So that's like mostly what I was doing on the Rob Ford story.
Yeah, because you wrote a couple of stories about the house that,
yes,
the famous, infamous photo, I guess, of the mayor standing with the guys, and the house that they were standing in front of was kind of it was known as a crack house. And you did lots of stories on figuring out where it was and where that house was.
Totally. And it was really close to, it sort of belonged, I don't know if they're still there, but it belonged to like a family that was friends with Rob Ford, essentially. And it was very close to a sort of constellation of high-rise buildings that the police ended up raiding as part of that gang raid. Basically, the drugs would come to the house, and that is where we know now, at least some of those like parties or drugs were like consumed, right? Yeah.
Did you listen to Jordan Heath Rawlings' podcast about Rob Ford, The Gravy Train?
It's not. I would like to listen to it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. In part because like I kind of was so immersed in it, and there's so many podcasts to listen to. But I hear it's great, and I am a big fan of those guys. They do a great job, so I would like to listen to it at some point.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the movie either. I haven't seen the movie either.
Yeah, no, neither have I. The podcast was excellent, and I thought, Ford he's a tragic figure, and it like in a lot of ways. And I'm just wondering, like, what do you just? We can quickly move on after this, but what do you think Rob Ford's legacy will be in Toronto in particular? And looking back and knowing now what we know about him, and obviously with his addiction issues, and and obviously addiction, it's a mental health problem. Do you think that things could have been done differently in terms of reporting, or do you think that it was just, he was the mayor and he was in a state of something, and that stuff needed to be reported on as it was?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really sad legacy here, and the addiction aspect, and it is really serious. And I do feel like at several points, maybe the city and frankly like the world, North America, was like laughing a lot at this guy who clearly had serious issues, and it was sad. I felt it really sad to watch. My big thing with it from the beginning, and why I always felt like it was a public interest story, is that Rob Ford was obviously an elected official with a tremendous amount of power in the city, and he was putting himself in a position where he could have easily been like blackmailed, or and so that was always my thing with it, and the other thing is he was a man who was constantly talking about doing things for his community and for underprivileged young people in his community. And I think that there's a bit of a mixed legacy there, because certainly he did do a lot of things for young people in his community. But at the same time, what went on there was not setting an example for young people in his community, because this was all very close to his writing. So that was always my thing with it, and why I felt like it was important to continue to report on it. Like, I think you're hitting on something really important here. I look back at, like, do you remember when he went on Jimmy Kimmel and it became like this real late night punchline, and underneath that there was like a lot of hurt, and this is a man with small children, and anyways, so
that's right. Yeah,
really good points.
Yeah. So obviously that was a big part of the reporting that you did. I can hear your dog. That's nice.
You might also hear my baby who's crying downstairs.
Work from home life, right?
Yeah.
So you, as I said in the intro, you won awards for not just that, but some other reporting that you did, sexual assault on campuses and mercury poisoning at Grassy Narrows. What's it like to win awards like that?
Cool. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. But I would say my most rewarding moment in journalism so far was when the Ontario government announced many millions of dollars to be set aside to clean up the mercury in Grassy Narrows. And so this is a much more complicated conversation about what's happening now with that. But I felt like, obviously the people of Grassy Narrows have been fighting for this for a very, very long time, and that victory lies with them. But I did feel like maybe like I helped here.
Right.
It was true injustice.
It was like 85 million that they put towards it, right? Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Of course, like, that victory lies with Judy De Silva and other people in Grassy Narrows, but it made me feel like, maybe this is a career where you can help. You can also do some good.
Right. So now we arrive at the podcast portion of this conversation. So I'm going to go ahead. Maybe I should just start off by talking a little bit about. So before Front Burner, CBC was not. I don't want to say CBC probably wasn't full in on podcasting yet. I feel like they were kind of creeping up, right? Like 2015, I went back and looked in the records. I think 2015 was when CBC did a first original podcast. That was about, I think it was called Campus or something like that. It was about like university students sharing their, and then of course someone knows something.
Yes,
was a
popular.
Huge project, and I'm not sure if it's still going, but there's been 5 seasons, and true kind of a classic true crime, but set in Canada, so obviously popular. And then in terms of Front Burner, I'm going to go ahead and say something that I don't think will be controversial. I'm assuming that the head guys at CBC probably saw that daily news podcasts like The Daily, like the New York Times, were doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And maybe CBC should also do something similar.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Because really The Daily for the New York Times turned their newsroom around and their entire operation. So
I think it's certainly one of the things that turned their newsroom around. I think at the time, the other big one that CBC was doing was the Uncover series, which have been like massively popular. I remember like just when I came on board, even before Front Burner launched, Josh Block had released the Uncover on the Nexium cult, and that went like bananas around the world. Yeah, but absolutely, like I think the success of The Daily, and I mean first Serial probably, right? Which I guess, and then The Daily, which is like, oh, this can be a news thing. And then I think the other big thing is that the demographics around who's listening to news podcasts. People were starting to see that. I think, not just here in Canada, but like The Guardian launched a news podcast around the same time as us as well. And look, I would guess, management is probably thinking, okay, like here is a way to reach younger generations.
Yeah.
What one way to reach them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause the Daily and most of my news I get from podcasts.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. So when the folks at CBC called you, and I'm assuming they said, we're thinking about doing a daily news podcast, and do you want to come in and talk to us about that? Or how did that conversation go? And were you thrown by it? Because you don't have a background in audio or radio, right?
Yeah, 100%. And so at the time, I was actually in Chicago. I was doing like a bit of a sabbatical at the University of Chicago, studying business. And so, but because I was in school at the time, I had like quite a bit of time sort of during the day between classes. And there's like such a beautiful campus at the University of Chicago. And I would put on my earphones and I would listen to so many podcasts. Like I was just devouring podcasts. And so it was kind of serendipitous when a friend, when CBC reached out, because I was like really in it, right? Like at that time. And like you said, you get a lot of your news from podcasts. Like I was really starting to shift here. Like I was getting a lot of information from podcasts, like even like the big, long, winding talk ones, like Ezra Klein, this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I came in, I auditioned. It was like a real process. And I auditioned like several times. And also some of my editors, Nick McCabe-Locos and Dave Downey, they gave me like a lot of tips. Like we would do like a lot of training and practice.
Yeah.
I would like interview people, like sort of fake interviews. And,
I was going to ask if you guys workshopped the show before it actually went live. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the tryout to get the job. It was a real learning curve for me, I'll have to say, on so many different levels. Way steeper than I had anticipated. Yeah,
because you said at some point, I heard you say this, or maybe it was in one of the written interviews, that you even had to learn how to talk into a mic properly.
Yeah, everything.
Right. Yeah.
And just even like having other things going on around you during. Like having a technician who will like sometimes be flagging you if there's like issues on the other end with sound, and having a producer sort of writing you notes during an interview, like just trying to be able to track like multiple things was a learning curve. And then I would say even the nature of a broadcast interview versus a print interview was a real learning curve as well, because I often treat my print interviews like a bit of fact finding. I would definitely do research before, but they would be, very long and really bloated. And, it wasn't really my job to act as an advocate for listeners, right? It was really because I could do that later in like a print piece. So, clarifying a fact, or sort of clarifying like the name, a person and their role. Like these are not things that I would have ever done in print interviews. So like these are all things that I also had to learn. And you realize like just how much work goes into the interview on the front end, like so much more work. They really are not fishing expeditions.
Right. Yeah. It's tight. Like once you get in there with your guest, whoever is helping you tell the story for the day.
Totally.
It's tight. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have tons of notes and research so that we can like, we can hit things that, we feel like, we need to hit in order to like really get that clarity for people.
Right.
So yeah, that's something that we've worked on a lot too. But anyways, that sort of was like the transition. But now I don't know how many, we're like hundreds of shows in, so it's like a little bit smoother now.
Yeah, well, I went back and listened to your first episode this morning.
Oh my God.
I know. Your reaction is not it's normal. I can't go back and listen to my first podcast either, but I mean, as you say, it's part of the growth process of getting better. So
yeah, can you hear the difference?
Yes. The first, not to get too into it, but the first, in your intro on that first episode, and it's about the white helmets, the Syrian white helmets. You're so quiet, and I couldn't tell if it's the technician needed to bring your gain up, or you were just like finding your voice, right? And that I'm sure that was part of the whole process. And now if you listen, you're just, and I can remember listening like to when Front Burner first launched and going, okay, this host obviously sounds different than a Michael Barbaro, but you never want to try and copy like somebody like that. But I think she's going to find her voice pretty quick here, and I think it's great. So yeah. So really,
that's so interesting to hear you say. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, what I'd like to do for the next little bit is really kind of pull back the curtain on Front Burner.
Sure.
And what it looks like from your end to host it, but also just like what it looks like to produce it as a whole. And obviously, you probably can't speak to maybe all the technical pieces, but how many people are on the Front Burner team right now?
Right. Okay. So we have sound designer Derek, producers Imogen, Ali, Elaine, Shannon, full time, and then often, hopefully, we have usually maybe like an intern through the Donaldson Scholarship around as well, or sometimes, especially when we're working on special projects, other people at the CBC will come in, and then me and our executive producer Nick.
Yeah, Nick followed me on Twitter today, or maybe he retweeted me. Anyway, that's good. Yeah, I mean, the size of the team is something that always interests me because, like a podcast like The Daily. I mean, I think they have hundreds of people now working on it.
Oh my God! Do you ever listen to their credits on Friday? I just want to like cry. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Although you mentioned at the top, I mean, we haven't. It makes me so mad. We haven't been able to catch them quite yet, which makes me a little bit. I also feel very angry because there's something so Canadian about it. Like, CNN is still the most popular channel, I believe, in Canada. Like, it just makes me. The New York Times is like right up, either the most popular newspaper or like the second most popular newspaper. But I feel like we got real close last week with our Ontario episode last Monday because we were right under them in the total episodes, which led me to believe that we like just almost had them. So it's like a real goal of mine this year at some point to take them. Maybe election day, we could do that.
I think you will. I think you'll do it. So,
but they have like 35 people. Yeah.
So your work week is Sunday to Thursday then, right? Because the release schedule of Front Burner is Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
So let's think about a Sunday. What does your Sunday look like? And what does a day of producing Front Burner from your end look like?
Yeah. So
where do you start?
In order to have a good Sunday, you got to have a good Thursday because it's hard to chase and produce an episode on Sunday because it's the weekend. It's hard to book people. So unless there's like real news that breaks over the weekend, we often try to set up Sunday's episode ahead of time. So, we didn't do that last Monday because the Ontario news really started to break over the weekend and we were like, we got to be on this. And then, it was like a really intense sort of Saturday night and Sunday. But I do know, like, if everything goes as planned this week, I do know what we're recording on Sunday. So, and that script, the question, all the research is already basically done to kind of walk into that interview on Sunday. But then how does a day normally go? So like we come in.
Just a minute, Jayme. Just a minute. So you know already what you're going to be talking about on Sunday? Like right now, what the topic is going to be. What's the topic? Can you say?
Yeah, sure. Because I mean, if we don't do it Sunday, like we'll do it another day. We got the guys from Vaccine Hunters, who I think are just like one of the best stories to come out of the pandemic. They're so cool. Yeah, they're so cool. Yeah. So, but you know, if breaking news bumps it, we might put it. I think the key is like to always have a plan, and then to be responsive to the news. And it took us a while to kind of really get to that place, but you always want to have a plan for like a good quality episode that people can listen to. But like the moment that like things really start to move, the key is to try and jump on it so that you can be in that feed when people are like really thinking about it.
Right.
Or that's like what we try to do. I'm not saying we hit it every week, but that's what we try to do. So, you know, we come in for 10 o'clock, we have a pitch meeting. Everybody pitches their stories. We sort of decide which stories we want to pursue. We try to like line up the week, actually, depending on the pitches. Like if there's 3 good pitches, it's like, great, let's pursue these. And then depending on how the week goes, we can like knock them out or move them. And then I usually try to record the interview around 12, 1, 2. Unless, again, news is breaking throughout the day. So yesterday we did sick days and we waited until the Ontario government made their announcement at like 3:30. We recorded at like 4. Right. So I do the interview. I try to keep it sort of, you know, within the 25-minute range. Sometimes much to, I'm sure everyone's dismay, I do not do that. Do your editors typically? Yeah, that's a good question, I guess, for people interested in podcasting. How much would you say your editors chop out to get down to that 25-ish minute range? Yeah. Like, is it a lot, or what do you think? Yeah, I mean, they're looking, because once you add the clips and the top and tail, like you're looking at sort of 25 minutes. So they're trying to hit like a 17, 18, 19, if it's really good, like 22-minute interview. How much do they chop out? Ideally, not a ton.
Yeah.
Like ideally not a ton. Because if we are like really on it, then and know exactly what we want with every question, we actually can usually get through it like relatively efficiently. So I think, you know, but sometimes for sure, they're chopping down like 30-minute interviews to 17 minutes. And they're really good at it. They're really good at it. Like not losing sort of that. I think when you start to take it beyond that, for the length of the podcast, you can kind of lose the conversation. Like it's not always a good thing. But also, you know, chopping down a 30-minute interview to 18 minutes, sometimes like you can just make it even more clear, and you really get the most meaningful parts out of it, which I think is also like a really helpful thing too.
Right.
Yeah.
Just before I ask my next question, I should have said this at the start, but if there's anybody that's watching on the streams that wants to ask Jayme a question, put it in the comments, and towards the end, I'll take a look and see if there's any questions, and we can ask that. So on a question about the guests that you have, a couple questions, I guess. So Front Burner, you guys don't follow really the method of the daily, where the daily, they almost exclusively talk to their reporters, right? People from their newsroom, you know, wherever they may be. You guys talk to, I mean, obviously lots of your colleagues in various CBC bureaus around the country and probably the world, but you'll bring in people like Jason Markusoff from Maclean's, which is owned by Rogers, which is a competitor.
Yeah.
So that's always interesting.
Although, you know, if you think about the mandate of the CBC, it is to promote Canadian culture and identity. And so, and you know, it is a public broadcaster. And so I think for that for that reason, you know, the New York Times obviously is a private company. They want to like big up their reporters. They you know, but I think that's one of the reasons for sure, or the big reason that we like to try and bring in all sorts of different voices from across the country and amplify like great Canadian voices. So I think that is
Right.
like really what drives us. But having said that, also internally we have like so many great reporters and great voices in the CBC as well, which is good to be able to leverage that network too.
Who writes the questions that you ask the guest? I'm assuming it's you, obviously, but
and producers. It's like a real team effort. I mean, the producers for sure take the like bulk of it, like sort of especially at the beginning. And sort of depending on the day, if it's more breaking news, we'll kind of tag team it together sometimes because things are moving a lot quicker. Sometimes they'll work on it for like a day ahead of time, and it'll all kind of be there. And we just kind of go over it, like what do we want to hit in all of these questions, and we go back and forth, like, and also they call it vetting, which was new to me like we'll do these like vet sessions. So with our executive producer Nick, so like Imogen, our producer, will be like, this is a script. This is what I'd like to accomplish. These are the questions. This is why I want to ask this question. This is why. We gotta go through it pretty methodically. And also that they'll often put like research, like really interesting articles that they read. And we often have like a pre-interview with the guest as well. So you can like read the pre-interview, or sometimes I listen to the pre-interview, and it gives you a sense of what you might get. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're in the interview with your guest, do your producers do you guys use Google Docs or some type of shared? Are they changing the questions, or are they adding in questions based on what your guest says? Like if your guest says something that you didn't maybe anticipate or was new information that you guys didn't know, do they pop that in and you have to just keep up with it?
So they often will drop notes in the Google chat function. So the scripts, like here, I put like a bunch of notes, and they'll put a bunch of notes in yellow, often under the questions. It'll often include things like stats, like, maybe worth noting or worth asking about if the guest like forgets to mention it or doesn't mention it. Like I could prompt them for it, or I could just, hit it and move on. And so then they will often write notes in the chat function, sort of on the right hand side of the screen. Yeah.
Right. Boy, that can be a lot. I mean, do you ever lose your focus when things like that pop up and you're grooving with the guest, and then you go, oh, I got to return to that. Sorry to backtrack and ask you this question. Yeah. Yeah,
totally. And I think I did it way more at the beginning. It's like a thing that you can just, it like gets better with practice, for sure. But yeah, for sure. But I would say like overwhelmingly, it's more helpful. So, and it's never like unhelpful. It's just like something that you need to practice to be able to like look and then go back to the conversation that you're having.
Right.
But the guys that do live radio, like Matt Galloway and Anna Marie Travanti, it's amazing. Like they've got so much going on around them.
Yeah.
Also, the podcast isn't live, so of course, like you can stop for a second if you need to. But I mean, those guys, like they have someone in your ear being like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. So that's worse for sure. Yeah.
Have you guys had any guests that you reached out to and asked if they would come on, and they said no thanks, I'm not interested? Have you had anything like that?
I mean, certainly there are people who have said no, but they often are like, oh, I can't. So I don't know if somebody wouldn't come on because of like they don't like the podcast. Like I don't know if that's happened. Although I will say we have been asking for an interview with Minister Harjit Sajjan at the Department of Defense for many, many weeks, and he has now been made available to us.
Yeah.
So
I can understand.
like,
I was thinking more like journalists, either like
right.
just people in the CBC or elsewhere. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I mean, certainly sometimes, people are trying to sort of manage their schedules, I think. But actually, I have to say, the journalists of the CBC are awesome, and they have been so great about the podcast. Like, even in its early days when we really like didn't sort of have all the systems in place. They were amazing. They were so patient and always keen, and like always willing to have fun. And that's been like actually one of the best parts of this job, getting to know people like Vashi Capellos and Susan Ormiston, who's like the coolest, Katie Simpson.
When Vashi comes on, I can tell you're just thrilled by it. You guys really, you like talking to her. I can tell. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
No, but that's part of the appeal of podcasts, and particularly daily news podcasts, is people start to get really familiar with these, I guess, characters people are in some way, and it makes it intimate. It makes it like you feel close to these people, and it's what makes a good podcast.
Totally. And you must feel like this with your podcast. Like when you're enjoying yourself, it actually usually makes for a better podcast, for sure. And also, whoever said that we weren't allowed to have a good time talking about the news, right? Like, not every day. There's some pretty grim stuff out there, but generally, like, why can't we talk about the news like how we talk with our friends over beers? Like, I have some pretty smart friends. I have some pretty cool conversations with them when we were allowed to like go to a bar and sit there. Like, just this is the beauty of podcasts. You're basically just taking those conversations, finessing them, making them being more like trying to translate them so that they don't sound like an insider sort of conversation, and putting them out there. And I think that is why people like them so much, also because like they don't have to be perfect. You don't always have to say the right thing. Like you can stumble, whatever.
Well, and one of the things over the last year with the pandemic, which I'm sure you guys have found with I'm assuming many of your guests, is the sound quality. Because I'm assuming you haven't been in the studio very much, or at least your guests haven't come into a studio as much as maybe before. So you have to deal with, we're not going to get studio quality audio with our guests. They're on their phone, or they're through their, AirPods, or you're doing a double ender and maybe the quality is a little better, but it's interesting. You're right. I think.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it's one of the interesting things that I've picked up during the pandemic is that listeners, the audience are becoming a little more, I guess, accepting of people are in their homes and they're not going to have even a half decent microphone lying around.
100%. I mean, we do mostly double enders. I record actually on my third floor, but I have like a pretty good setup that I connect to.
You got the Shure mic there.
Yeah. And then I connect through like a Comrec system to the CBC studios. But, I think people are they have so much more patience. Even you look at TV, like so many of my colleagues are doing hits, or like dogs are in the background. And I think people are just trying right now to do the best they can. Although I will say, like, I'm really looking forward to coming back to more in-person interviews.
Right.
I miss them. Yeah.
Well, for sure. And there's something about actually sitting across from somebody and looking them in the eye when you talk to them. Yeah. What about, this is maybe an interesting time to ask this. How many times when you've been doing Front Burner have you guys had just things with a guest go completely sideways? Like either you did the interview with them, and I'm assuming this doesn't happen much in a studio setting, but you lose the audio, or you drop them from a call and, you know, you can't get them back on, or which I think would be a nightmare scenario. You line up a guest and they bail at the completely last minute and you don't have a show.
Yeah. So like literally all of those things have happened. I remember one time we interviewed Susan Armiston. She was like, I don't even know if I told her this story. She was like with the migrant caravans, coming through sort of South America or Central America, and she was literally talking to us like from the back of like a metal shed, you know, on a break while she was moving with the caravan, and we thought we lost the audio like after we did the interview, but we ended up finding on like someone came in and they found it on like a backup CBC server, but there were like several hours where we were like, we don't have a show tomorrow. And also like, how can we call her back and ask her to do this again? Yeah, I mean, that happens. I think it's a little bit easier because it's, again, not live. So you can always kind of like try to like get these guys back. Like if a guest has to run out, we've been like, look, totally get that you know, have this important thing that you have to go do, especially during the pandemic. A lot of these medical experts and doctors, like, they're like, I really actually have to go to the Ontario Science Table meeting. They're like, okay, yeah, we should do that. But like we can usually get them later. I mean, the other thing is that sometimes it just ends up being like a crazy long day because the podcast doesn't end till like doesn't drop till 6 a.m. So like we do actually have time to kind of scramble, you know, if we need to. But I would say
you'd rather not.
Yeah, no. And I would say it's like super rare that happens. Like usually people will be pretty amenable. We can like pick another time to record. And also like the technical stuff doesn't happen very often. It'll mostly be like a problem getting people up for like 10 minutes, like getting their Skype to work or something.
Right.
Or their Skype keeps dropping and like we just have to like try another route or something like that. But
So since you've been, have you mostly been at home for the, like, obviously you were on maternity leave, but for a bit of that, but since the pandemic started, did you guys all go home and you've been recording and producing
our whole
from
team
home?
Is home. Yeah. Like, so basically the majority of the CBC is at home. Like the radio shows are from studio, I believe, most of them, and obviously television. But like so many of the producers are working from home, and it was like possible for us to set this up here. And I have like foam all around, so it works okay. So I think it just worked for us. You know, if it didn't work, then I would have gone in. But it was working. It has been working fine. So.
Did your tech guys, when you guys realized, okay, we're going to be working from home for a while here, did the CBC tech guys, the technicians, did they come to your home and put up the foam walls and bring in that nice microphone for you and get everything set up?
Yeah, Derek just took this microphone from our studio actually. So we just basically, and also Derek's like the system that I call into most days is in Derek's like kitchen. Like so it routes through like his kitchen. And then I just got all this foam on Amazon and just put it up. Yeah.
So this is, it's a technical thing, but I think lots of people that are into podcasting, it's something that I'm obsessing about, is how are people recording things wherever they're recording it? So like I like you showed your mic. It's like, okay, Jayme uses the Shure SM7B, whatever that one is, right? Or that type.
Yeah. So you would know more than me. Yeah.
So, but how are you actually talking to your producers when you guys are actually, recording the episode? How are you talking to your producers and to the guests? Or is it through Skype or Zoom, or what's the system that you just mentioned with your producer?
So I call into, I'm going to totally butcher this. I feel like I'm not the right. So I call into like the CBC's studio switchboard, right? And so some days, because our producers, I didn't mention this before, our producers are all on a 4-day schedule. because the days are really long, can be really long when you produce an episode.
Yeah.
So, for several days a week, I call into Derek, whose like system, I guess, routes through the CBC's studios. And then most of our guests are on Skype, and they're double ending themselves. Sometimes they're on Zoom, sometimes they're on FaceTime. And just for people listening, double ending is like, so maybe Dale and I are talking now, but I would like also hold up my iPhone like this and press a voice memo, and I would record myself as well. And then when the producers edit it all together, they take the audio usually from this recording because it's cleaner and it sounds more intimate. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing that, I'm not kidding. I wonder all the time, and I'm sure a lot of other podcasters think, how are they recording this? Because it shouldn't sound as good as it does. But yeah, you're right. People holding up their iPhone to their face and while they're talking through Zoom. So it's interesting.
Yeah, the technology is unbelievable. It's
that
your iPhone can sound that clear. It's really incredible.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about for you and for Front Burner is, do you ever wish that you guys could do, I guess, better, like nice stories, good news stories? Because I looked at the list of episodes for Front Burner so far this week. It's all been about the pandemic.
Yeah.
Last week there was a bit of a mixture, right? Like there was some, like there was a Russia thing, but in these days it's hard to find good news that's not like pressing news. So what's the balance there, I guess, or is there one at all?
I hear you, man. And also like some of our listeners, when we hear that from our listeners too, one of them was tweeting us the other day, he's like, please stop doing pandemic stories. And we or just like not stop doing them. I think he was just saying, I need a break. Like I'm so exhausted by this. And I would say I too am exhausted by this. It feels like we have to do them. Like we can't not do this debate over paid sick days. It feels so important for so many people in this country who, essential workers who, have essentially been left behind in this pandemic, and the virus has gotten them in their crosshairs. So I think it feels so urgent, so many of these stories. But at the same time, I think that the news cycle is so dominated by the pandemic too, because there just isn't as much going on, because there's such a holding pattern around so many other things. Like people are in their houses. And then I also think that like every story now becomes a pandemic story, like how the pandemic is affecting, like a real estate story is now how real estate prices have gone wild because of the pandemic. It just feels like it's like, gotten into every possible crevice, which makes perfect sense. But it is really full pandemic right now. We do try every time we can grab a different story. Also, we really like doing culture stories. Britney Spears' fight with her dad, like these kind of stories. I think I was not totally sold on doing lots of culture stories when we first started Front Burner, but much credit to Nick. I think if you treat them seriously, these stories, you really learn so much about. You just learn so much about the world. Like they teach you a lot about society, and so we try to grab those. And also we're trying to grab some sort of more feel like stories that might be helpful to people. We did one a couple weeks ago, and maybe it was a little bit there was some sad stories in it for sure, but people who are just sort of fed up by the pandemic, we were like, well, maybe this will be helpful for people to hear that they're not alone. I think so that's kind of where we are right now, but I think it is this pandemic.
What's
like, pandemic all the time?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the end of it. And by the way, this will be kind of this might be controversial, but that Britney Spears documentary that you mentioned, I didn't think it was as good as it could have been.
So I haven't watched it.
The story of Brittany, of course, it's good, but very interesting. And the thing with her dad, it's all the doc wasn't that good, but that's just my opinion.
Well, now maybe I won't watch it now that I got your review.
Yeah,
maybe I will watch it and I'll send you my thoughts.
Your thoughts, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the toughest episode that you guys have done on Front Burner? And I guess tough, it could be like emotionally difficult or just technically difficult.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think I have an answer for both. The one we did last Monday was tough. The Ontario's path to the current crisis that it's in, just because it was a lot to do in a short time frame, and it was a big mix, and I ended up sort of narrating it, so it was just like a lot. So there was like probably 4 of us working through on that, like from Saturday all the way to Sunday night. So that was like a hard episode to do, harder than usual. In terms of emotional, I would say a while back, before I went on mat leave, we had one of the fathers who had lost his wife and his child on the Iran flight. I believe it was 752. And we had also brought on a wonderful woman who had lost her uncle, I believe, in the Air India flight. And his loss was so immediate because it was so soon, and his grief was so raw that I think I was just so overwhelmed by it in the interview that I didn't even know what to do next. Like in my head, I was like, I don't even know what to say. Like I feel like this overwhelming sense of sadness, like sitting here with him, and he had a button of his daughter and his wife on his. And anyways, I sort of like muddled my way through to the end of the conversation, which I don't even know if I feel like I probably did a horrible job, and then just like burst into tears at the end of the interview. I couldn't, and that had not really happened to me before. And not something I really want to do, because you don't want the interview to be about yourself, and I don't want this man to be comforting me in this moment. But I was like sort of like uncontrollable, like crying. I had to I couldn't even speak for like 2 minutes. Like when you're like, I just can't. So anyways, that was the hardest interview for sure.
Well, I mean, the story is devastating. And the really sad and unfortunate thing about that whole plane crash was that the pandemic started, 6 months or 6 weeks later, and everybody has forgotten about it. I mean, it's one of the greatest tragedies in Canadian history, and nobody seems to be talking about it. And it's partly pandemic, but honestly, I don't know if they would be talking about it either way. And it's really sad. So,
and the pressure on Iran to do something is what? Like it's so small. It's, and all of these families, they don't really have the answers that they like so desperately want and should have. Anyways, it's tragic. It's tragic. The other thing I would say is I really don't like feeling like I don't know the pushback, in an interview, which is why too it's like so important to kind of do so much prep work on the front end. So I mean, this has definitely happened where like I wish I had said something, but the other side of this argument is this, and does that particularly come up like with politicians, if they come on and they have their talking points and you're just thinking, I know that they're going to say this and I just had nothing to give back. Like, is that what you mean? Yes. Yeah. And so the key is you really want to talk through those interviews. But
Yeah.
look, I'm still kind of kicking myself that the Minister of Environment came on
Right.
a little while ago, and like it was like a totally fine conversation. But at one point, he was like sort of comparing his plan to the Green New Deal, and I should have just been like, "Whoa! Like this is no Green New Deal. Like it's a plan. Like
Right.
for sure, there's stuff here, but like this is not a Green New Deal." But you know, by the time he was done, it kind of moved on. And but
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I should have done it. I should have done it. I should have waited and done it after, or I should have done it in the moment. And so, you know, I just think that those are things that. You know, hopefully you learn and then you try not to repeat.
Yeah. What's your favorite episode that you guys have done?
Ooh,
many, all
hard.
of them.
No, definitely not all of them.
Okay.
Oof, man, I don't even know if I can answer that. Like, I don't even know if I can answer that.
Is there one topic, I guess, obviously besides the pandemic, is there one kind of theme or topic that you, when it's in the news, that you're really excited to discuss it on the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I felt pretty proud about some of the work that we did this year around long-term care homes. I felt like that was really important. So I'm, you know, maybe not excited, but
yeah.
I really liked the episode we did last Monday on the road to crisis in Ontario. I really liked the episode we did on Borat.
Oh.
Like, yeah. I don't know. It's hard. They kind of like it sort of all bleed together, so it's hard sometimes. I like.
It's so funny that you say that, Jayme, because over the last week I've been watching clips from the first Borat movie, and
so
I believe that it could be the greatest comedy ever. It has aged so well, and especially you know obviously during the Trump presidency and post-Trump presidency, it's even better. And the opening scene, I just kill myself laughing every time. It's so funny.
And even the second one is he just hit so many things in there that were just going on in the U.S. and the world. It was really brilliant. So I don't know. It's a hard question to answer though, because there's, you know, I don't know. I like to think maybe sometimes like the body of like how we've been doing on topics like over time.
Yeah.
You know, we like kept coming back to long-term care homes. We're like continuing to come back to sexual misconduct in the military. Right. We'll continue to come back to sick days. We'll this fight over sick days. We continue to come back to sort of the questions around regulating the big tech platforms and that debate. So, you know, I like to think that the show has these kind of like fault lines. I think we did a lot of work on like white supremacists and sort of like down like those conspiracy theory rabbit holes. There was an episode that our producer Ali James did back a couple of months ago, talking to someone who sort of, you know, ended up being in a relationship with somebody who like just went right down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole. I really liked that one.
Right.
Felt like it was kind of like a really good like illustration of what's happening right
and
now.
Topical. Yeah. So we'll wrap up right away, and you've been really generous with your time. You've been hosting Front Burner for 2.5 years now, I guess. Mm-hmm. What's your one or two big lessons for people that are podcasting? And keeping in mind, most of the people that are probably following this are kind of, amateur hobbyist podcasters. But what are a couple of big takeaways for podcasting for you? So
maybe I'll say two things. And I guess what I'm sort of talking about here is like an on-air kind of thing. And they're going to sound like they don't mix, right? But I actually think they do. So hear me out. Like on the one hand, I would say prep. Like you want to make a good podcast. Like this idea, you cannot just sit down and just make a brilliant podcast, right? Like all the great I mean, maybe some of them you can because they're like very funny, but that's like their whole shtick. Like they're supposed to be sort of disorganized and meandering. So, but you know, for us in Front Burner, like we work really, really hard at trying to make episodes that people can follow and that gives you like clarity. You know, I think about like, you know, moments ahead of time, like would it be helpful if like a summary was here, you know? And so, but the other side of it is that I would say like also like be yourself and be comfortable in not being perfect all the time, and know that the relationship that your listeners have with you is one of like intimacy. They're listening to you on their earphones, and it's okay to like be a bit spontaneous, and it's okay to I think let like you know like let parts of yourself sort of be out there for people as well, and so I think that if you can try and strike a balance between these things, that's what often can make a successful podcast. And I say this because a lot of the podcasts I listen to, I think that is what they're doing, you know, ultimately. Like,
right.
You know, even like the guys that sit down, they sound like they're really shooting the shit, like the Pod Save America guys, and you know, what's another big one? The El Chapo guys. Like these are smart people, smart men and women who I think, you know, are definitely spending time thinking about how they want to do it, in what order they want to do it, what they want to say, sort of before they show up, so that you're like giving people something that feels like thoughtful, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, it's very good advice. Do you have a couple more minutes? There's a couple of comments, couple questions that came in.
Sure.
Just a couple. So I think if I can show this one. Can you see this on the screen here?
Yeah. Around pre-interviews. We try and do them for some guests, but sometimes feel we lose a little of the spontaneous personal stories. Yeah, that feel a bit focused when we try to have them and tell it again for the show. Do you record the pre-interview? Any tips on revisiting those good tidbits from the pre-interview in the main one? So that's a really good point. So I think for sure the pre-interviews are super, super helpful in like when you're trying to explain a complicated thing. It's sort of like this real negotiation that you have with the person that you're doing a pre-interview with. You're kind of like working out the kinks of like trying to explain, you know, sick days, like a policy like sick days, right? Like what do we both think are the most important things to hit here? For these personal stories, I think this is a really good point. Like if you get someone to tell their story and then they tell it again, you know, do you lose part of that? And I know, you know, for example, when we did an episode, Alex Trebek had died, and our producer Imogen found this guy who, like, Alex Trebek was like his mentor, and he was just so gutted by it. And she just was like, okay, we're gonna put you on, and we just sort of had that interview, to sort of not lose, you know, to like retell a story. The other thing, and I think that is probably the way to go, especially if you're doing it quickly. But the thing in personal stories, if you can do like a long pre-interview with somebody, you sometimes end up getting these details out of them that you maybe wouldn't have done in like a 20-minute broadcast interview. And so the conspiracy one, I think, is a really good example. Ali had spent so much time with this woman, talking to her about her personal experience before. And so when we went to do the actual interview, like we knew to prompt her for these really important details, that I think ended up illustrating the story so well. So I mean, this doesn't really answer your question because it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of another. I would say generally my gut would be like the more immediate it is, to not do the pre-interviewing people's personal stories. Like, I think that what we did on the Alex Trebek was the right call by Imogen. Yeah.
Great. Okay, just one more, and John has 3 questions, but the first one we answered about the studio. We talked about that a little bit, and when you're in studio, you're at CBC headquarters in Toronto, right? But I think,
yeah,
I think these last 2 are really interesting questions. What was your most combative interview that you've done with Front Burner?
Minister Christian Freeland.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the topic that you talked to her about then?
We were talking to her about like multilateralism, and it was sort of when Trump came in, and he sort of was like not into international institutions, as we all know.
Yeah.
And this was also at the time when China had taken the 2 Michaels, and they weren't following international rules. And here we were talking about international rules all the time. And so when we had her on to ask her. She was a foreign minister at the time. Why are we were just talking about international rules all the time. No one else is playing international rules. Like, so why don't we just let Meng Wanzhou go? And
right.
Yeah, and it ended up being like a pretty combative interview, I would say, which is fine. That's cool.
Yeah, that probably doesn't happen very often. I don't gather that happens much on the show.
No, because the show is sort of designed to not be like that.
It's not in depth.
It's kind of a more like sort of fact finding show. Like, we're kind of more curious than, but yeah, I mean, also combative interviews where necessary, I think are important. Like good accountability interviews are important.
Right.
On the night of the Raptors,
yeah. What time did you guys wrap up?
What time did you finish? Yeah, I think we were home at like 4. But honestly, we also like partied after that. After we recorded, because it was like the best night. So we went out on the street and we just kind of partied with some people on the street too. But I actually think at the time that that Derek put it to bed, it was 6 a.m.
That was a wild one. I can remember when you guys put that episode out. It was great. Yeah, I was so happy that the Raptors won.
Maybe that is my favorite episode now that I hadn't thought of it that way. Maybe that.
Yeah, it was actually a good news episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Well, Jayme, you've been so generous with your time and the insight that you gave about hosting and working on Front Burner. I think, as I said, these are things that when I listen to other podcasts, I wonder how they're doing this and what is going on behind the scenes. And Front Burner, it's a great podcast. And so thank you very much for joining me and sharing all this today.
Yeah, this is so fun. Thanks so much, Dale. You are also an excellent interviewer, so I had a really, really nice time.
Thank you. Well, yeah, and of course, keep up the good work and good luck with broadcasting from home. Yes. And hopefully you can. Do you guys plan to go back to the studio when the pandemic is over, or is it from home for forever?
Yeah, I mean, I like it because the hours with Front Burner, it's not like, oh, your show is between 4 and 6, whatever the news is between 4 and 6. Like that is what you have to. That is what you deal with. So I find the days can get really intense and long. So I do like this as an option. I can put my kid to bed. And then I can go do the January 6th U.S. riot episode at 11:30 at night. So I guess my hope is probably the same hope that a lot of people have right now, which is definitely want to get back to working with human beings, like across the table, but would love some sort of hybrid work balance. Yeah.
No, I think everybody would agree with you on that. Well, again, thanks very much, and have a good weekend as you go into your Friday, Saturday, and I look forward to listening to the Vaccine Hunters episode on Monday.
Yes,
if you guys end up still doing it. So
yes,
yeah,
so
thanks.
I will definitely run it at some point soon. So
Good.
Please tune in. Okay, thank you so much, Dale. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks, Jayme. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, please visit the Saskatchewan Podcast Network, saskpodcastnetwork.com. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And thanks for joining this conversation with Jayme. It was there were lots of people on the stream. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.